video, I'm going to be showing you what a 2020 rapture and a 2020 to 2027 tribulation timeline looks like. Before I get to that, I want to show you though, last year I done a video on it was called 13 blood moons to the rise and 13 blood moons to the fall of the Antichrist. And I kind of laid out a little map here if the rapture should occur in the year 2019. And you can kind of see here I've got 13 blood moons. If we start over here at this farthest one and we go to the midpoint of the tribulation, which at that time I thought would be 2023, had that come to pass. 13 blood moons there, and if you start with Pope Francis and you count, you get 13 blood moons there. And this is basically, you have 7 years. This is broken up into two 7-year groupings that are similar to the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of famine that we see with Joseph in Egypt. And then we had a start date for the start of the tribulation would have been in September 19th of last year. We would have the mid in 2/12/23, and then in 26, and we would have had these dates for there are 1,260 days, there's 1,290 days, and there's 1,335 days to different points at the end of the tribulation. And so 2019 came and went, and that nothing happened there. And so then later in the fall into December of 2019, the economy, everything was doing really, really well. Stock market is an all-time high, and it really didn't look like anything would happen in 2020 either. I was really thinking in my mind that really the next target point would be out here sometime in 2024. Probably after the elections with Trump. I figured Trump would probably get reelected. Everything keeps going the way it is. He would get reelected, and then either after his election or sometime in this little time slot out here in the 2024-25 time frame, that's when things are going to start. But things rapidly change then, starting in January of this year, and that had to do with the coronavirus. I remember reading about it on Zero Hedge. I remember going then with a coworker of mine who's a Christian. We started looking at this thing and we said, man, this thing is the real deal, and this thing is going to be a big, big problem. And so then what we did was we took all of our money out of stocks. We both have, in the company I work for, everyone has really massive 401ks. So we moved our money into cash. We've been through market crashes before. And so we thought this would be a prudent time, especially because I was anticipating that sooner or later we're going to see this economic collapse has to come our way. So we pulled our money out there, did a little shorting in the market, made some money there, and then gone long in gold and silver and doing very well right now with that. That being said, though, I really don't think after we look at this timeline that we're going to be around here that long. And once all that stuff began to happen, I thought, man, I got to start looking at a 2020 rapture. I got to see how do things pan out? How do the dates line up? What kind of things are we seeing in the heavens? All that kind of sort of stuff, because definitely, even without what I'm about to show you here, the handwriting is on the wall, so to speak. The economic collapse is coming. You know, we needed a catalyst here sometime before the start of the tribulation, before the start of the 7-year tribulation. We needed a catalyst. And that catalyst, and I knew right away when that thing started showing up, if this thing continues the way it does, this is a catalyst, is going to bring, you have to bring economic collapse, and you have to bring fear into society, and then people will surrender their rights and freedoms to the government. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now here. The coronavirus is that catalyst, and it's already begun. Even if the coronavirus disappears today, the damage done to all the different markets, the oil market, the stock market, all your supply chains around the world have been damaged and disrupted. The food chain is getting disrupted. Oil's at a price down between $20 and $30 right now. Oil really has to be in the $45 range to be profitable for the type of fracking operations we have in this country. I know quite a bit about the oil industry because I work for a S&P 500 corporation. We're in the top 200 of the S&P 500. I work on a product. It's the best product in the world. It goes into the oil fields. Our biggest customers are ExxonMobil, Shell, all your other type of oil companies. That's who our product service. And we know that we need to have these prices. And this is going to be, for our business, this is going to be really hard on us right now, what's coming. And I know there's going to be layoffs and different things like that coming. So We're kind of hunkering down. Things are still going good. We just had a meeting with the president and everything. But he came out and he said something in a meeting that we had just the other day. He came and told us about the virus. And once the vaccine comes here, and he expects it to come in December, that everyone in the entire company is going to be required to take the vaccine if you want to come to work. And I'm sure on a worldwide basis, it's not just him who's saying that, but everyone is saying that. So I think that's something we can all expect, and that's going to also lead into the mark of the beast. It's not the mark of the beast, but it will lead into that, into the future here. Everyone's getting conditioned to just kind of go along with the flow, or you can't do business. So we can see that coming. So everything is coming. Everything is lining up the way we thought it would. So back now to my chart here. I want to take a look here at how the dates line up and how they pan out if the rapture should occur in the year 2020. So if we look at trumpets, what happens here is we're still in the age of Pentecost. Pentecost has not finished yet. Pentecost is going to come to completion at the rapture of the church, and that can occur anytime from now until the Feast of Trumpets coming this fall, should the rapture be this fall. And so if we look at the timeline here, if we start on trumpets 9/18/20, this tribulation starts on this date here, and you go 1260 days. It takes you the midpoint to 3/1/24. 3/1/24 and 1260 days takes you to Friday the 13th and 27th. Now that's a significant day because you know this, my whole last video I did 13 blood moons. 13 is a really big number in the occult. It also has to do in the Bible. It has to do with rebellion, apostasy, evil, and all these other kind of things kind of related to Satan and the devil. And so it doesn't surprise me in the least that the tribulation would come to an end on a day that's kind of a high holy day for Satan and his minions, because they went through a lot of trouble over here to put Pope Francis in power on 3/13. This was a very deliberate chosen date. That's how they operate. It's how the Illuminati, how the Freemasonry is. The number 13 is huge. And if you look in the founding of this country, you'll see how the number 13 is panned through everything. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Then I want to get to, if we add 1290, in the book of Daniel, you have 1290 and you have 1335 dates for the end of the tribulation. So if you add 1290 to the 1260, that takes you to Yom Kippur, and that is the period of time that Christ should begin his millennial reign. And that's on the exact day, according to Torah calendar, according to their calculation for Yom Kippur, that begins on 9/11 at sunset, and it ends on 9/12 at sunset. So it takes you to that precise day. Now in the book of Daniel, you have another set of days, and that's 1335, and it says, whoever makes it to the 1335 is blessed, and that takes you into the millennial kingdom. And in my opinion, anyone who survived the tribulation makes it to that date is blessed. But I think there's some other things going on here with that number. And so what I did was I took that number and I added it to the 1260. And the reason I did that was because in the book of Daniel, it just says that the Antichrist is in the middle of the seven. He's going to enter the temple and desecrate the temple and proclaim himself to be God. And so I thought, well, which date exactly is that? And so you add the 1335 to the 1260, and this is another ultra accurate. It takes you exactly to the afternoon of 4/8/24, which is the total solar eclipse going across America, which is judgment. It's right in the middle of the tribulation. The exact midpoint from the 1260 is 3/1. That's a couple weeks later on 4/8/24. So if something goes on here, Antichrist, he goes to power somewhere in this middle section, maybe even on the day of the solar eclipse, but that's when the ultimate judgment, because the tribulation as a whole, this is 7-year tribulation, but the Great Tribulation and the wrath of God is poured out on the second half, and that's after the Antichrist takes up position in the temple and declares himself God and demands to be worshipped, and that's the ultimate apostasy going on here, and that's when God has to pass his judgment. So when we take a look then at the entire whole now, after he is gone to the temple, we have the wrath of God being poured out here. If we look at the overall timeline, we find that everything absolutely fits like a hand in a glove for the rapture and the tribulation to start in the 2020. Coronavirus, that kicks it off. We have a few other what I call little bonus features or points here. On 4/3/20, we had Venus in conjunction with the Pleiades. And then on 5/31, we're going to have what's left of the Comet Atlas. Comet Atlas is fading right now, and it's going to arrive at the Pleiades on Pentecost on 5/31/20, and or whatever's left of it is slowly shrinking here. What these two things are pointing to is they're pointing to the rapture of the church, and what they are symbolizing is Venus. In this example down here, Venus is represents Christ. Christ is the bright morning star, and he's going to, when it goes in conjunction with Pleiades, Pleiades are the 7 angels of the 7 churches in the book of Revelation, and it's symbolic of Christ coming with Christ the groom, coming to pick up his groomsmen, and then they're going to come out and to pick up the bride and steal her away in the middle of the night and rapture the church. And the exact same thing here happens with Comet Atlas arriving at the Pleiades in Pentecost. There's something even about the name of Atlas that's going to ties into the rapture too. That name is unusual for this particular situation. So, and I'll talk about in a little bit. So the next thing I want to do then is I'm going to go and just kind of go through an overview quickly of what I'm going to cover. And there's another set of things that are going to pan into this or to bolster the case here of a 2020 rapture and tribulation. I'll be talking about that. And I'm going to start that in just a moment here. In this next section, I'm going to do a quick overview of what I'll be covering in this video. How the Jubilee year and Jesus starting his 3.5-year ministry by quoting Isaiah point to the start of his millennial reign. Sometime between the year 2026 and 2029. How Psalm 90:10 and the rebirth of the nation of Israel point to the start of Christ's millennial reign in either 2027 or 2028. How the rapture of the church will complete the feast of Pentecost, but can occur any time from now until Rosh Hashanah, trumpets. The tribulation will start on the next Rosh Hashanah, or trumpets, known as trumpets, following the rapture of the church, which completes the harvest of Pentecost. The book of Daniel and the book of Revelation have 3 time periods for the second half of the tribulation: 1,260 days, 1,290 days, and 1,335 days. In the year 2027, the 260 days will point back to Pope Francis coming to power on 3/13/13. The 1,290 days will take us to the exact appointed day that Christ will be starting his millennial reign. The 1,335 days will point us back to the midpoint of the tribulation, to the exact day of the second celestial event to occur over America, the first occurring 7 years prior, an event that symbolizes judgment on the world. The significance of the number 13 to those who follow Satan and worship him as their king and Lord. 13 blood moons to the year 2024, the year the Antichrist sets himself up in the temple and demands to be worshipped. 13 blood moons to the fall of the Antichrist in the year 2027. How the conjunction of Venus and the Pleiades in April and the stealth arrival of Comet Atlas to the Pleiades on Pentecost symbolize Christ coming with his angels to rapture the church. The date of Christ's death and resurrection is believed to be between the years 30 and 33 AD. Jesus begins his ministry 3.5 years before his death. He begins his ministry by reading from Isaiah 61:1 and 2. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim the good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. In other words, Jesus here proclaims that he was the year of Jubilee. Jubilee means that that year the land was to lay dormant, prisoners were to be released, and debtors forgiven. Jubilee means a year of rest, a time to rest from labor, a time for grace, and a time to celebrate freedom set forth by God. It will also be a time of deliverance and restoration. The rule of Satan over the earth will be taken from him and restored to Christ at the start of the millennium. Jesus made these statements sometimes between the year 26 and 29 AD. So if we take 26 AD and we add 40 Jubilees, or 2,000 years, that takes us to the year 2026. 2026 then and to 2029 is the date range for the start of the millennial kingdom. So what that does is tells us that the tribulation, according to this theory, will start sometime between the year 2019 and the year 2022. Here, 2019 to 2022. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into the next theory here, and this next theory is says basically this: the generation that sees the rebirth of Israel will see the return of Christ. And so Israel became a nation on May 14th, 1948. Most Christians who believe in a literal 7-year tribulation believe that the generation that sees the rebirth of Israel will see a second coming. The passage that is used to support this is Luke 21:29 through 32, and I'll read that here. And he told them in a parable, look at the fig tree and all the trees. As soon as they come out in leaf, you will see for yourselves and know that summer is already near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that the kingdom of God is near. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all has taken place. Psalm 90 gives us what I think is the best definition of a generation. The average lifespan of David's generation, Christ's generation, and our generation is still between 70 and 80 years. The psalm was written during the time of David, so this is most likely of all the generational patterns, or like a generation can be 120 years, a generation can be 40 years. This is most likely the most likely correct definition. So if we take May 14th, 1948, and we add 80 years, that brings us to the year 2028. If we take 2028 minus 7 years, this is based on a generation of 80 years, the longest period of time a generation, according to this definition, that the generation can be. That brings us to the fall of 2021, which is then the latest possible start date for the tribulation. So if we take these two theories and we look at them, we see that the two theories overlap and allow us to narrow down the range, and that's kind of a good thing. If there are different dates, that might be a problem, but they both they overlap. And so looking at the dates here, we know 2019 to 2026 is past, so we can eliminate that. We know that 2022 to 2029 is 81 years from 1948 and can be eliminated based on 80 years being the maximum length of a generation. So that leaves only 2021 and 2020 as possible start dates for the tribulation. Now, the appointed time for the tribulation to start is Rosh Hashanah, which is trumpets. So if we add our 1260 and 1260 and then 1290 and 1260 and 1290 and finally 1260 and 1335, the question is, do any of these dates end up on a Moedim, an appointed time? And so what we find out here is that only the year 2027 does. If we add 1260 and 1290, it takes us to 9/12/27, which is Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. The day, according to Ken Johnson in his book Ancient Messianic Festivals, is the day Christ begins his millennial reign. Next, I'm going to talk about the 7 appointed times. In this next section, I'm going to talk about the fulfillment of Pentecost and then the 3 appointed times that are yet to be fulfilled. That's trumpets, Yom Kippur, and then the Feast of Tabernacles. So let's start here with the Feast of Pentecost. It's called the Harvest of First Fruits. It's about really the harvesting of God's people to heaven, harvesting of souls. Pentecost will be completed at the rapture of the church. Now, the rapture of the church is tied to Pentecost, but it can happen on any day of the year. It doesn't have to happen. It could happen on Pentecost. My guess is going to happen on trumpets, and what that does is that brings Pentecost is completed when the rapture of the church occurs, and that's kind of what I've blocked out over here. Like I say, it can occur anytime. God is most likely going to keep the door to the ark open as long as possible, and the tribulation is going to start on trumpets on Rosh Hashanah, and my guess is he keeps that door open as long as possible to have as many souls. Jesus is the good shepherd. He leaves the 99 like that song. He leaves the 99 to go after the one. and I think he's probably going to wait to the last minute, so we're probably not going to see the rapture until the end. God's in control. He can do whatever he wants to do. But the reason that the rapture can happen anytime and yet it's tied to Pentecost is because Pentecost is the way Pentecost is determined. It's determined by counting 49 plus 1. 50 has to do with completion or fulfillment. The rapture occurs once the fullness of the Gentiles comes in. God set up Pentecost differently than any of the other feast days. The other feast days are all locked to a day. The way they count it kind of opens the door for Pentecost to be at any time, any day of the year, and it's really completed. Like we're in Pentecost right now. We're in the church age, and Pentecost really is a church age, and we're in that age right now. And so when the rapture of the church comes, the Holy Spirit who is in us is going to take us out with the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit is still going to be on earth, but it's probably more like it was back before Christ, before Pentecost is how it's going to be. It's going to be a little bit different. I'm not going to get into that right now. So then the next thing we want to look at here is we want to look at the tribulation through the start of the millennial kingdom. Most people know how this works, but we'll go through it. The tribulation will begin on trumpets, Rosh Hashanah. The midpoint is 1,260 days in. And then it ends after 1,260 days plus 1,260 days. And that was what we call the tribulation period. Then we have Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, and that's the next appointed time to be fulfilled, and that's when Christ begins his reign. And then during that reign, we have a big party, and that's the Feast of Tabernacles. Every nation during the millennium is required to come to that feast. And then we have in the book of Daniel, we have 12:11. We have a very unusual passage there. It says, "Blessed is he who makes it to the 1335 days." And the reason I think it's blessed is because you made it through the millennium. You survived the tribulation. And so what I want to look at next then is the dates for the tribulation. Should it start in 2020? That would be on September 18th. And then we have March 1st for the midpoint in 2024. And then we have Friday, August 13th in 2027. And then we have Yom Kippur on September 12th, 2027. And then we have, if we take the 1335, I talked about this before, comes to 2595 days. We divide by 2. It's 1,279.5 days, which brings us to the afternoon of the 8th, because if you take a full day and a half a day, that would take you to the next day, and that would be in the afternoon, and that's when the eclipse occurs. And so now, excuse me, let's look at Yom Kippur, and this is how it's calculated through Torah calendar. This is from Torah calendar. Yom Kippur begins on the evening of the 11th, and it completes on the evening of the 12th. And so you see when we add the 1260 days, we add them up here. This is from date and time calendar. So if you take from Friday the 18th and you add 1,260 days, takes you to March 1st, 2024. From March 1st, 2024, you add 1,290 days. That takes you to a Sunday, September 12th. Even the date that's a Sunday, that's kind of a bonus thing too, because Christ rose from the dead on a Sunday. And then again, we have a Sunday here for his beginning of his reign, the start of the 1,000-year millennium. And again, if we take a look at the calendar here, we've got Yom Kippur. We have the tribulation starting here, and then we have Yom Kippur right here, 1290 days. Christ begins his millennial reign. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the end of the tribulation, and that would be Friday, August 13th, 2027. And we'll go back to the layout here. We have on again, the start of the tribulation here, and then we have the end on Friday the 13th. Again, we have this whole 13 thing going on here, and we have Pope Francis is in the occult. The Freemasons are really, really big. I'm going to talk about that in a second with the number 13. We have the 13 blood moons to the rise of the Antichrist coming into the temple. We have 13 starting from here to the time he falls. So next I want to look at the number 13 and how it ties into Pope Francis. A lot of the stuff I've learned all about the United States and how the United States and Vatican are really tied into bringing the Antichrist and the false prophet into the world. And Zenith 20, I just reread the book, kind of went through it quickly the other night, and kind of refreshed my mind and everything. And it's everything that's going on today. This was written quite a while ago, back in 2012, and even before then. But everything about this book is coming true. Other than initially, I thought it was like 2016, but things always take a little longer than we think, and everything's coming to pass in here that he talked about. And so, what I want to talk about now, though, is about the number 13. There's a book by Bullinger here that it's Scripture and Numbers. I have that book, and he talks about the all the numbers in Scripture and what their meanings are. And so we're going to start right here. It says, just like the Great Seal of the United States, the number surrounding Pope Francis's election kept coming up 13. White smoke at 7:06 p.m. That's 7 plus 6 equals 13. He's 76 years old. 7 plus 6 equals 13. He was elected on the calendar date 3/13/13, which sports two 13s of its own. 2013 also yields, when you add up all those numbers, it adds up to 13. He was announced at precisely 8:13 p.m. Vatican time, or in military and European time. 2013, making for an astounding 3/13/2013 at 2013. So you can see the amount of effort the Freemasons and the Luciferian people put in. 13 is a massive number to them. And so they put a lot into this guy. And so you know this guy is not just a little peon here in the end times. He is a major player, and he is either the false prophet or he is he's like next in line. According to Tom Horn, in one of his more recent books, there may be one more person coming. So he may or may not be it. But right now he certainly looks like it. And then we go on here, and Bullinger talks about, we'll talk about the significance of 13. As to the significance of 13, all are aware that it has come down to us as a number of ill omen. Many superstitions cluster around it, and various explanations are current concerning them. Unfortunately, those who go backwards to find a reason seldom go back far enough. The popular explanations do not, as far as we are aware, go further back than the apostles. But we must go back to the first occurrence of the number 13 in order to discover the key to its significance. It occurs first in Genesis 14:4, where we read, 12 years they served Cheldel, or whatever this guy's name is, and the 13th year they rebelled. Hence, every occurrence of the number 13, and likewise of every multiple of it, stamps that with which it stands in connection with rebellion, apostasy, defection, corruption, disintegration, revolution, or some kindred spirit. And now the period of time, the second half of the tribulation, is when the Antichrist comes to power, enters a temple, and makes himself God. And you have to understand something about the Freemasons. They're actually actively working at having this done. They want to see the temple rebuilt. They want to see the man of perdition put in there. And they are doing all the things they can to bring him into power. And I've got another little slide here I want to talk about. This came from a book on Freemasonry, and talks about the United States, and we have the seal and everything here. So I'll just kind of read this. The 13 steps, we're talking about the seal right here, refer to Satan, Belial, and rebellion, which Kabbalistic gematria assigned to the 13 colonies, 13 stripes, 13 olive leaves, 13 arrows on the seal, and the 13 letters of E pluribus unum, all of which emphasize the importance of the number of 13 in any enterprise which is controlled by Freemasonry. Now, we just saw with the Vatican that number 13. And so here's another thing kind of telling us about how important the number 13 is to the occultic world. And the final thing, the most important thing here, is that it reminds them of their war against Christ and his 12 disciples. And so remember, they're Luciferian. You know, they hate us, and they hate God, and they hate Christ. And so that's why you see that number 13 so much in so many things. And now if we look at Washington, D.C. and the Vatican, there's certain structures that are designed here. You've got, you have a dome building, and then you have an obelisk or a phallus here. And here you have a dome building, obelisk, and a phallus. And this here is a reflecting pool, which is supposed to add to the energies that this whole thing is designed to do. And what these two structures are designed to do, they're designed to bring the false prophet and the Antichrist into the world. And the people who are behind all of this stuff are actively involved and working on bringing him into existence. Okay, now back to our main slide. We saw that a lot of effort was put into just coming up with this number, the number 13 with Pope Francis. We know that there are 13 blood moons now to the time that the Antichrist comes to power in the temple. There will be 13 blood moons then to the fall of the Antichrist. And biblically, the number 13, again, remember, it represents rebellion, apostasy, defection, corruption, disintegration, revolution, or any other type of kind of evil associated with this. And you have to understand that during the tribulation period, the last half of the tribulation is the Great Tribulation. This is when the Antichrist takes rule. He's going to be a ruthless, nasty leader. It's going to be a horrible time for anyone who's alive. The people that worship him and the people who don't. If you don't take the mark of the beast, you're going to be beheaded. You can't buy or sell. Anyone who worships him, this is not a nice guy, and things are going to be really, really bad. God then has to pour his judgment out during this period of time. This is going to be the most difficult time in the history of the earth. And it's just something that you don't want to be around, and you really want to get to know who the Savior is right now. You want to really be a follower of Christ before all this breaks out. You really want to get onto the ark, so to speak, as Barry says. Get on the ark now, because this is going to be a horrible, terrible time. If you haven't seen the video Out of Shadows, this is an absolute must-see to really understand the occultic world that I've just been talking about here. This video shows you just how deeply our culture and leaders are influenced by Satan himself, and how they sold their souls basically for fame, glory, power. This video was created by a stuntman who worked in Hollywood, whose eyes were open to this whole thing when he got injured, and he met a Christian woman who was his therapist. It's got like 11, almost 12 million views now. It's really well done, and like I say, it's very much eye-opening, and it really ties into everything you're watching in my video here, and it will help you understand the occultic world and just how deeply embedded it is into our society. Next time, I'm going to look at the 1335 days that are talked about in the book of Daniel. In the book of Daniel, it says, "Blessed is the one who waits for and reaches the end of the 1335 days." The 1335 days puts you into the millennial reign, and I guess if you've made it through the tribulation, you are definitely would be blessed. So let's see here. Let's move over. Okay. So if we take from Friday, September 18th, and we add 1,290 days, that takes us to Monday, April 8th, 2024. That was derived by taking the 1260 plus the 1335. That's 2,595 days. We take that and we divide it in half, and that brings us to 1,297.5 days. And so if you take 1,297 and you add and you're half a day in, that puts you into the afternoon of April 8th, 2024, or 1,298 days. And so that is the exact day of the solar eclipse that is going to cross America. So, and then what I did was I took it's 1335. So look at 13, you look at 35. If you go into Strong's Concordance, again, these are just little bonus points. It's interesting because it's a time of destruction and judgment. And when you look up the 13, you get destruction here. That's the word that shows up under in the Hebrew. This is the Hebrew. And then when you look under the in Greek, if we look up the word, this word here, number 35, it means of unrecorded genealogy, without whose descent cannot be traced. And so if you think about God, 35. So look at 13, you look at 35. If you go into Strong's Concordance, again, these are just little bonus points. It's interesting because it's a time of destruction and judgment. And when you look up the 13, you get destruction here. That's the word that shows up under in the Hebrew. This is the Hebrew. And then when you look under the in Greek, if we look up the word, this word here, number 35, it means of unrecorded genealogy, without whose descent cannot be traced. And so if you think about God is going to be passing judgment in the second half of the tribulation, he has no beginning or no end. He's always been here. So the eclipse is going to cross one half of the United States here. 7 years prior to that, we had the other solar eclipse that went across here, and then we have this here. This forms an X across the United States, and then you wonder, okay, why the United States? Well, we know that the United States is going to be involved, is heavily involved in the bringing about of I believe he's going to bring about the Antichrist. I think Barack Obama was a type of Antichrist. I don't know whether or not he is it or not, but he definitely is a player, and he's probably going to be a player in the end times. He's running a shadow government right now, trying to dethrone Trump, to get Trump out of office. All these people are working behind the scenes. We have the coronavirus right now going on here that's going to give the one world government people an opportunity to really take power. And so everything is set up, everything is rolling. We're in that period of time where everything seems right for this to happen. Back in our main slide here, we just talked about how when we add the dates up, we get Friday the 13th, points back to Pope Francis. That's the number 13 again. The 1290 takes us to Yom Kippur, and the 1335 points us back to the solar eclipse. We have 13 blood moons starting over here until the midpoint of the tribulation. Then we have 13 blood moons until the end of the tribulation. This whole 13 theme, Christ was betrayed by Judas on Nisan 13. In the book of Revelation, chapter 13 is all about the false prophet and Antichrist coming to power. What else? There are 7 blood moons. Okay, we start here with the lunar tetrad. There are 7 blood moons until the time of Jacob's trouble. So 7 has to do with perfection and completion. Blood moons have to do with judgment coming to Israel, the nation of Israel. And so we see all the signs basically coming to conclusion here. We see the Revelation 12 sign, which talks about the pre-tribulation rapture occurring before the tribulation begins. We've got Venus and we got the comet Atlas also pointing to, I'm going to talk about them in a minute, pointing to the pre-tribulation rapture. So we have overall we have like a mosaic here that is pretty incredible. If you take everything individually, it's very hard to pinpoint a date or time. But when you take the whole mosaic and we combine it with other things such as the length of a generation being 70, 80 years, if we look at the time of Jubilee, nobody really knows the Jubilee, but it is interesting that if the Jubilee was when Christ made that statement from Isaiah, that it takes us to the state too, that's kind of just another extra bonus little point there. So everything is really pointing to this is a time, this is a year, this is now. Do we know for sure? No, we don't. But I hope it is, because I'm really leery here about with what our CEO of our company came out and said that we're going to have to take the vaccine if they expect to have this thing by December, and I'm not real keen on getting injected with something that hasn't really been tested very well. I always have visions of the movie what is it, Zombie Apocalypse, where they have a cancer cure that goes awry and everybody turns into zombies. I don't know if that's what's going to happen, but that's what pops into my brain, and so I'm not real cool with that idea. I'm close to retirement. I have quite a large 401k, and maybe that's the time to quit if we're still here in December of 2020. So I've got one little more thing to cover here. We're going to look at the Venus conjunction with the Pleiades and comet Atlas. That's coming up here in just a second. In a Jewish wedding, the groom comes with his groomsmen in the middle of the night to steal his bride away. A Jewish wedding is a type or symbol or image of Christ and his relationship to the church. The groom takes his bride to his father's house. The marriage is consummated. The marriage celebration then lasts for 7 days. In the rapture of the church, Christ comes like a thief in the night and he steals his bride away. He takes us to his father's house, and for 7 years we celebrate the wedding of Christ and the church. During the 7-year tribulation, we will be with Christ in heaven. And at the end of the 7 years, we're going to return with Christ for the wedding feast of the Lamb. Revelation 12:9 says, "Blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb." So another question is, who are the people who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb? The invited guests are those who are saved after the rapture of the church. These are people who went through the tribulation. That makes me wonder, like when in Daniel he talks about those who make it to the 1335 days, they are blessed, and those are the people who are going to make it to the wedding supper of the Lamb. And why do we know that who these people are? It's because the bride is not invited to her own wedding. So we know that the people who are coming, they have to be saved, but they're not the church, because the church is the bride of Christ. What we see here is the planet Venus is in conjunction with the Pleiades in the constellation Taurus. In the book of Revelation, Christ calls himself the bright and morning star. The planet Venus is known as the bright morning star. In the image here, the Pleiades represent the 7 angels of the 7 churches. In Revelation 1:20, it says, "As for the mystery of the 7 stars that you saw in my right hand, and the 7 golden lampstands, the 7 stars are the 7 angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches." The constellation Taurus represents Christ coming to judge the earth during the tribulation. But before he comes to the earth, he comes with his angels as a thief in the night to steal his bride away, as I spoke about before in the last couple of slides that you saw. So in here we're seeing imagery of Christ, the bright morning star, coming with his angels to come and steal the church away before the tribulation. And if we look at the common atlas, we see the same type of imagery here. We see the common atlas is passing by on May 31st. May 28th through May 31st is typically when Pentecost, I think it's Torah calendar has it the 28th, and if you just Google it, you'll get like Sunday, May 31st. But again, we have that same kind of imagery. We have the common atlas, who would like represent Christ, passing by the Pleiades, coming to get the angels to come and get the church before the great and terrible day of the Lord. And then we have Venus between the horns, which is the bright and morning star, coming to pass judgment on the earth here in the very near future. There's an interesting thing, because this comet was named Atlas. Atlas in mythology, Atlas's daughters, his daughters are the Pleiades and the Hyades. Because of their virtue, they are taken and placed into heaven. So that's very similar to what Christ does with the church. He comes and gets us, and he takes us up to heaven. And so I think that's kind of an interesting thing here with Atlas. We have that same kind of imagery there. So let's go now and look at our map, our road map here again, one final time. Closing, I just want to say that whatever happens this fall, don't forget that God is on the throne, and that his timing is absolutely perfect. What I've presented to you here is basically just observation as a watchman, and I'm just reporting on what I'm seeing. And from what I can see, this is looking like the year that everything is going to begin. We've got the layout here is just, I don't know, it's almost too good to be true. But that being said, even if we're here in 1 to 2 years, all that means is that there's probably just another more accurate way to look at the information that I've just presented to you here. I guarantee you there would be another way to interpret it. And as we keep watching, sooner or later, and more likely sooner, we're going to see all these things come to pass. And if you are not a follower of Jesus Christ, now is the time to become one. And if you are a follower of Jesus Christ, this is probably one of the most exciting times to be alive. And I hope to see you all very, very soon in the air when we meet our Lord and Savior in the rapture of the church. I want to thank you again all for watching this video. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. It's going to help get the word out. For me, watching for the Lord return and watching other people's videos who are also watching for his return, they give us hope in this very, very dark period in history. If you're paying attention to what's going on in the world is just getting darker and darker by the hour. So again, I just want to give you thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all very, very soon.